Good evening, Group 1. I am Quenisha Scott Bland, and today I will be going over the medium theory. I did my research paper on this, and it will be followed by a presentation. Just bear with me as I orient my iPad to face my MacBook. Okay. Medium theory. In this presentation, I will go over the following aspects. First, we'll have the historical orientation, followed by the core assumptions, then the scope and application, then the social interaction and integration, the criticisms of the medium theory, McClellan who fires back at these criticisms, the Christian worldview, followed by a conclusion, and then my references. So let's just jump right into it. Historical orientation. Marshall McLuhan of 1964 challenged conventional definitions when he claimed that the medium is the message. With this claim, he stressed how channels differ, not only in terms of their content, but also in regard to how they awaken and alter thoughts and senses. He distinguished media by the cognitive processes each required. McLuhan popularized the idea that channels are a dominant force that must be understood to know the media influence society and culture. Essentially, McLuhan was a huge person in the movement of the media theory. He came up with this quote that the medium is the message, essentially saying it's what's in the content of the message that really matters. Next slide. Core and assumptions. Medium theory focuses on the medium characteristics itself, like in the media richness theory, rather than on what it conveys or how the information is received. In medium theory, a medium is not simply a newspaper, the internet, a digital camera, and so forth. Rather, it is the symbolic environment of any communicative act. Media, apart from whatever content is transmitted, impact individuals and society. McLuhan's thesis that people adapt to their environments through a certain balance or ratio of the senses and the primary media of the age brings out a particular sense ratio, thereby affecting perception. So once again, McLuhan was really advocating that it wasn't the element of the message or how the message was being conveyed. It was the message in itself that was the most important. And he really created a lot of theories, came up with these different messages, and tried to convey these, convey this theory to other people in society. Next slide. Scope and application. Medium theory examines physical, psychological, and social variables as the senses that are required to attend to that medium, whether the communication is bidirectional or unidirectional, how quickly messages can be disseminated, whether learning to encode and decode in the medium is difficult or simple, how many people can attend to the same message at the same moment, and so forth. Medium theorists argue that such variables influence the medium's use and its social, political, and psychological impact. So essentially, it goes back into what McLuhan was originally talking about, how it goes the message itself goes way deeper beyond how it's being conveyed. It's a psychological, physical element that people use as a social variable. And essentially, he was just trying to advocate that, it's not about being a difficult or simple message. It's about just how many people can communicate with that message and how it affects their lives and their overall interpretation of a social environment. Next slide. Social interaction and integration. Social interaction approach. The social interaction approach attempts to organize communication in terms of how close they come to the model of a face-to-face interactions, whereas the social integration approach characterizes media not in terms of information, interaction, or dissemination, but in terms of ritual or how people use media as a way of creating community. So, two dominant approaches, social interaction and social integration, are used to explain complexities of the medium theory. Social interaction approach, once again, it attempts to organize communication in terms of how close they come to the model of face-to-face interactions. This is according to Littlejohn and Falls, page 292. Television does not fall very close to human interaction, but is more of a form of people engaging primarily to the media. Contrast to this, using a webcam to talk to relatives across the country is seemingly close to having a conversation in person, despite the possible hundreds of miles separating the two individuals. Social integration, Social integration, on the other hand, characterizes media not only in terms of ritual or how people are using this media in creating a community. As people are avid watchers of specific television shows at a certain day or a certain time consistently, or whether logging onto a favorite site, this approach directs our attention to the need to ritualize experiences, explaining that the content is not always the primary, but the act and the comfort of the repetition of the act makes us feel involved. In a social cultural sense, it authorizes and consolidates patterns of culture and genre, allowing us to regulate where those fit in the great scheme of society and what individuals choose to perceive. For example, when watching TV, a person does not allow the television to dictate what they watch, but rather what show they find interesting or what appeals to their entertainment appetite. This is something that the television does not automatically do for us. Sorry, I needed water. Criticisms of the medium theory. Medium theory has no interest in the social shaping of technology. Medium theory does not cover how or why social technologies exist. McLuhan's confusing terminology. A shift from print to television causes many social problems. McLuhan is not regarded as a prophet. Now, Raymond Williams, his study of television, which specifically engages with McLuhan's writing, is a prime example of this approach in the field of media studies. Rather than accepting TV's influence of culture and the visual of the television era, Williams was concerned with the social needs which were met by the development in radio and television, specifically the primary need to connect the domestic space of family homes to a large-scale urban communities. This notion opposes the generalizations of the media theory. It is also resisting the notion of inevitable social effects ensuing from specific media technologies. Now, without a doubt, medium theory requires a bit of social perspective to offer an adequate presentation of social media and society. And with this, he satisfies all these factors that McLuhan did not: social commitment, economic concerns, and political control. Accordingly, the most pertinent criticism brought forward by sociology of technology relates to the role played by new technologies in social change. Technologies don't regulate, instead they produce and are operated upon in a social field. It is the way technologies are used rather than the underlying elements of the technology that is important. In terms of McLuhan's confusing terminology, McLuhan commonly made up new terminology that explained what he was observing or arguing. Instead, he drew on familiar words and stretched on their meanings to apply to his unfamiliar notions. He rarely explained what he meant by using these terms. For instance, he had an issue working out against the common sense view that TV is a visual medium that one watches passively from a distance, while one holds and touches a book whose content stimulates one's active involvement and imagination. Nonetheless, descriptions like this seem a little backwards and may have initially caused readers some confusion and maybe overall like a huge misconception of his work. And lastly, McLuhan is not regarded as a prophet. Many scholars that criticize this theory felt that he was not this prophet or this Hail Mary of media theorists. It was just something that stood out to me, and I just, McLuhan fires back. Now, McLuhan theories are an even better match for the current digital age than they were for the communication technologies that were around when McLuhan was even writing them. Let's see. The Global Village was an exceptional way of describing a world of email and texting that went beyond the minds of his counterparts. This was Levinson on page 98 of his book. McLuhan's Understanding Media granted awareness about media and the information age. Now, as expected, McLuhan responds to these criticisms as stated previously on the slide. And he just basically said that it is how they are used that counts, rather than the numb stance of the technological idiot. Other theorists are more circumspect by treating the correlation of media and culture as a complex rather than a direct engagement. By presenting this element, it is contributing to the critical view that media theory remains a one-sided theoretical model. However, Paul Levinson, in his book Digital McLuhan, says that McLuhan's theories are an even better match to the current digital age than they were in the communication technologies that were around when McLuhan was writing. McLuhan elaborated on the global village long before there were newsrooms, let alone the internet. And when McLuhan wrote of digital electric media making all of us present to each other across the globe, it was like an exceptional way of describing the world of email, texting, and texting that went beyond the minds of most of his counterparts. Furthermore, some early critics of McLuhan put the word media in quotes to differentiate themselves from what they saw as McLuhan's odd usage. One reason for the general reassessment of McLuhan's among critical theorists and others was they were concerned with the issues of political power, that may be the fear of top-down control over information that is not a good fit for the era of the personal computer, internet, camcorder, mobile phone, and other technologies. This is Joshua Murowitz, in 2001. Next slide. The Christian worldview. Now, today, Christians seek their personal truths from the message of God. Most of the time, it is not how the message is conveyed, but the content of the message, what is really matters. By asserting McLuhan's medium is the message, Christians can decipher the word of God and find new ways to disseminate the message to others. All scriptures is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. I decided to add a perspective of a Christian worldview into my presentation because I really felt like this all ties back into our relationship with our Lord and Savior. It is what's in our message or in our prayers that counts the most. It's not how we go about the messages or when we do them or just the overall conveying of them. It's just really getting that message back to Christ that I feel like is most important. So, conclusively, as technology becomes more and more complex and more broad, this message will have all the more possibilities in our attempts to make sense of these advancements. Within media technology and management, and attention to the intrinsic aspects of concentrated areas of technologies will be necessary. This does not call for a reductionist form of the media theory, as has been set forth in the past. Rather, it calls for a theoretical model sensitive both to the social background of new media technologies and to the elements of those technologies individually. Here are my references, and that concludes my presentation. Once again, I'm Naisha Scott. Thank you all for watching my video. I enjoyed the class with most of you, and I hope that you guys find my presentation interesting yet informing. I will be away for annual training with the National Guard this week. Well, actually for the next 2 weeks. So just keep in mind that I'm going to be responding to your presentations just a little later. Nonetheless, be blessed, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your summer. And good luck on the final examination. Thank you.